You are listening to the Loida Lewis podcast, hosted by Loida Nicolas Lewis. She's a trailblazing businesswoman, leader, philanthropist, and the widow of Reginald F. Lewis, the visionary leader who was the first African American to build $1 billion company. With unparalleled determination, Loida Lewis has not only excelled as a successful attorney, but also shaped a $1 billion empire. Following the untimely passing of her husband, Reginald F. Lewis, she took the helm of TLC Beatrice, carving her legacy as a successful business leader. Be inspired and learn from her as she shares her wisdom, the secrets to her success in both business, in love, and in life. Let's live, love, laugh, and learn. With your host, Miss Loida Lewis.
Welcome to the Loida Lewis podcast. Let's live, love, laugh, and learn together. I have the pleasure to introduce you today Anla Cheng, who is the founder and CEO of the Serica Initiatives. A few weeks ago, she honored 9 Asian and Asian American women in a huge gala. And I want to thank her for including me among those 9. So welcome to this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. So my first question is, what inspired you to found and continue the work of Serica Initiative?
Sure. Serica was a byproduct of an existing company called the China Project, which I spent 90% of my time. And its mission was to really bridge U.S. and China. We had a media vertical, which included newsletter and podcast. We had our data research and consulting, and we also had our events. And then people would come to us and say, can you do this kind of research? Can you do that kind of research? And it really didn't fit our mission. So I said, why don't we start a nonprofit? So just to give you an example, we had a donor who wanted me to do a research on sex trafficking in China. And I thought that was a great idea, but it didn't fit our vertical. So Serica was created. Another donor came to me and said, can you do a film on Chinese American scientists? Because this was a time when the American government, and especially Christopher Wray of FBI, wanted to accuse all 10,000 Chinese American scientists as being spies. And so they said that the whole idea was for Trump not to leak scientific research and material to the Chinese, but in fact, by accusing the Chinese American scientists as spies, many of them lost their jobs, could not socialize amongst friends, they became social pariahs, and they had no choice but to accept job offers from the Chinese government. So out of the 10,000, 2,500 have already gone back to China. And many of them are not even Chinese born in China. They may be Chinese Americans, but they had a lot of knowledge about science, and they were hired by the Chinese government. So what turned out to be an initiative to make sure that information did not leak from the U.S., it ended up that happened.
Was that during the Trump era?
Yes, it was. Mm-hmm. And so that's how Serica was born. But now, since then, we've morphed quite a bit, and now we have 3 missions. The first is empowering women, thus having the annual gala. Second is fighting AAPI hate, which has become, again, sort of a result of the Trump era. And thirdly, I believe that as I get older, it's really not about me anymore. It's about the next generation. So I want to give a leg up to the next generation of leaders and women leaders. So as you know, when you were honored, we also honored rising stars. And we had certain criteria, we had great judges, and we selected 3 incredible rising young women leaders.
Yes, that was excellent.
Yes.
How did you get the 9 of us first? Yes.
It's a long story, but usually we honor 2 to 3 honorees, and I've been doing this for 8 years now. I think the maximum number we had were 4. But this year we pivoted to include Asian Americans and Asians from Asia. And I started the search maybe last October. And because many of them were not within my usual orbit, because being Chinese, my focus had been primarily on China. So when I reached out to people in Indonesia and Singapore and the Philippines and Thailand, etc., I had to be introduced. For instance, I was very happy to be introduced to you by Curtis. And so
Curtis is Ambassador Curtis Chin
yes,
of
yes.
Asian Development Bank.
Right. And currently at Milken Institute.
No,
Yes.
yes.
And so there were others who introduced me, but they didn't know me personally. So it took them a little time to give the response. So October became December and February came and they weren't responding. So rather than sitting still, I said, you know what, I'm just going to ask as many as I can and see what happens. And if I end up having 20, so be it. And so we ended up having 9, which was a great number. And we thought that just starting with a bang was the right way to go.
Okay. So this is more the first time that all Asians or
Yes.
Asian Americans
This was
were
the first time.
honored.
And I guess because AAPI hate became more prevalent during the Trump era, and as you know, so much abuse has happened in the last 5 years or so. So this is a byproduct of that development.
Okay. So Anla, like me, you're also an immigrant. So tell us about, where you immigrated from and your beginning years.
Sure, sure. So my parents were born in China. My mother from Shanghai and my father from Hunan. And my father worked for Chiang Kai-shek, and they all were refugees, 1949. My parents told me they flew on the last plane leaving China.
Wow.
My mother came from a family that was a banking family, and her mother and their parting hours gave her a lot of jewelry that she sewed and hid inside her jacket. And they all flew. Their car turned over. They lost their luggage. They had nothing. And they flew to Hong Kong first, and then they flew to Taiwan. And then eventually, my father was sent to Japan as a diplomat, and that's why I was born in Japan.
Japan, yes. And did you stay? Did your family stay in Japan
Yes.
while he was a diplomat?
Right. So he went back and forth to Taiwan, but I stayed in Japan, and I went to a school called Sacred Heart, which a lot of Filipino nuns were there. So
Yes.
I had quite a few Filipino nuns who raised me. And we spoke English mostly. And then from there, after I graduated from high school, we came to the United States. But my parents, even before they got married, they made a promise that when they had children, they will send them all to the United States because they didn't see a future for us in Japan or in Asia.
Yes, yes. But so in Japan, you were still considered foreigners.
Yes, yes. I went to an international school of the Sacred Heart, and it was all international students. They're all girls. But the best part was lunchtime because we had to all bring our own lunch. So I had somebody from Bangladesh, somebody from Brazil, and my last name was Cheng, so I was surrounded by all this different names from all over the world. And at lunchtime, we all exchanged our lunches, and we get to savor all the cuisines from all these different countries. So it was a great time.
So so it's an exposure to international culture in a
Very
way.
much so, yes. And I think that's where this whole diversity, equity, inclusion started in my school.
Yes. Sacred Heart was founded by a nun, and there was a movie about her. Yes. But
I'll look
so
into that. Yeah.
yes. So after high school, by that time, your parents decided to move to the United States.
No, they didn't leave Japan because he was still working, but they sent all the three. I had 2 other sisters. We all came to the United States to
So
study.
you had 2 siblings,
Yes, I had an older sister and the younger sister.
and so you're in the middle.
I'm in the middle.
Yes, yes. There must be something in middle children because I'm the middle too.
Oh, are you? Yes, we're outgoing. We're
Yes.
peacemakers,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Oh,
yes.
right.
We have to.
Yes.
With the
Right.
siblings on the
Yes.
left and the right.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So when you came to the United States after high school,
Right.
where did you enroll?
Well, the first thing I went to was an art school called Pratt Institute because
yes.
I wanted to study. And my parents, they wanted me to become an architect, but then they knew that I was interested in fashion, as most girls were. So they said that once I finish studying, I can go back to Japan and they'll have some space for me, a store or whatever that I could start. But what happened was after I graduated,
I read that you graduated magna cum laude.
Yes,
which
yes.
is great honor.
Yes, yes. Well, I think the school that I went to had a wonderful educational background and teachers, and it didn't come too difficult, I have to say. So,
But still,
Yes.
to graduate magna cum laude in any school is still,
thank you. Thank you.
great work.
Thank you. So I was doing some fashion buying and also for magazines. And then eventually I thought it would be interesting for me to enter journalism. So that was a great transition to become a journalist and to do interviewing. So I worked for the United Nations Diplomat magazine, and I also interviewed at many, many magazines, including some fashion magazines such as Town and Country magazine, W, etc. And then that was a time after a few years, my parents said, I think you've exhausted your stay. Why don't you come back to Taiwan or Japan? And by then I had tasted freedom. And it was a journey where I began to realize that I'm not this shy girl that many people said, you're so quiet, but I have a feeling there's much more behind you. And they were right. They knew me better than I knew myself, because I always thought that I was very quiet and very shy. And in fact, at a girls' school at that time, the nuns used to tell us that we were really trained and, groomed to become a good wife. That's what they
During
taught
that
us.
time.
During that
Yes,
time.
yes.
But when I tasted freedom, I loved going out, doing things, being entrepreneurial, trying out something new. And I said, I'm not going back to Asia anymore. So at the time, I wasn't making that much money as editor or journalist. So I went back to business school. And so that my parents never denied my educational background. If they say I want to go to school, they will pay for it. So I went to get my MBA first at NYU. And I went to night school while I worked at Goldman Sachs. And
So you were able to, Goldman Sachs is one of the hardest.
somehow it was very lucky. I had all my magazine publishers write me letters, and I got in. I was shocked. And actually, it was more a stroke of luck because I had no idea the significance of Goldman Sachs. All I knew was that they said it's a great company. So I had asked the publishers if they'll help me write a letter. So in a way, I guess I was a little bit gutsy to ask the publisher.
Well, if you do good work,
Yes.
they'll do it for you.
Yes, and that's what they did. So I was able to go on the training program, and then I went to evening school at NYU. But then I found it very taxing because the job was demanding and the school was demanding. So I ended up at Wharton. I applied for it, and I finished my business school there.
At Wharton, yes. That's where many finance guys,
Yes.
graduated from.
Yes.
And probably aside when you graduated from there, that's also when you went to Goldman Sachs, or
No,
did
after
you do it
that.
after?
After that, I stayed at Goldman Sachs for quite some time, and wanted to be transferred to the corporate finance department. And
You were doing what in
I was
the
on the
first time?
trading floor, and also going through their training program. And I learned a lot of things on the trading floor. There was so much to learn because everything was very new to me.
Would you be the only Asian then during that time?
I think so. I was the only Asian. And also when I came to the States, I didn't even know what a checking account was because I led a very sheltered life. And my parents at that time, milk was delivered in glass bottles every day, fresh. And any transactions that they had, they would go to the post office or the bank. So they did not have checks. It was not something that they used every week. So I wasn't familiar with checks. So I had a lot to learn.
And when you were at Goldman Sachs, you asked to be transferred to the corporate. What made you do that? Why did you decide that trading is not for you?
Right, because over time I realized there were many divisions. There's corporate finance, there's M&A, and there's trading and analysts, etc. And I wanted to try something new. I was very adventurous, and I said, maybe I want to understand the different facets of finance and the different facets that Goldman Sachs offered. So I tried that. And actually, you know what? In that department, they were expanding their Asia division. So I was up against other Asians for that. And they hadn't hired them, but they were beginning to hire more Asians. But on the
Yes.
trading floor, I think clearly I was the only Asian. Because the first thing that I was asked, a fellow asked me, he sat next to me and he said, and this is very funny, he said, "I'm blue blood from Rhode Island. What are you?"
Wow. My goodness.
Yes.
Yes.
So I didn't know what blue blood was.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So there was a lot for me to learn.
Yes. So how did you answer that?
I said I'm a peasant.
Good
I
for
just
you.
made a joke out of
Good for you. Yes, yes. Great. And how many years were you at corporate finance in
No,
Goldman
I
Sachs?
did not get the job after 8 interviews. And that's why I decided to go to Wharton and finish it at daytime, because it was impossible for me to do it daytime and nighttime. Yeah. I was on my 8th interview, and then at that time, this other fellow, Japanese fellow, got the job. So
Okay.
So
All right.
anyway, it's
So MBA is usually 2 years
yes, that's right.
at Wharton.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And
But
how
I had already started at NYU, and I was able to transfer the credits.
the credits? Yes. Who would you say were some of your classmates at Wharton?
Well, all I did was study, so I did not really socialize at all. And I did keep in touch with a few, but I really made no time to socialize.
Yes, you wanted to pass and not repeat
Yes.
or do anything that.
Right, and I regret it because I would have liked to have joined many clubs, and I myself at the time didn't know that I had the leadership skills to do that, and it's a journey, so one doesn't know. All I wanted to do was just study and pass and have good grades.
Have good grades, yes, like a true Asian daughter.
Exactly.
Yes, and so once you graduated from Wharton, where did you decide to?
So my first job was at Citi. In
Citibank.
those days, it was called Citibank, exactly. By the way, I had a motivating reason why I wanted to do well, because I didn't want to go back to Asia. That was the reason why.
You want to be self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient, independent, and make my own independent life. Exactly. So I worked at Citi, and my goal was to work in the Asian department of private bank. In those days, private bank was not a big deal because they didn't have too many private banking clients.
Can you just explain what's the difference between a bank and a private bank?
Oh, okay. Private bank is a part of a bank. The initial concept of a bank is that you take deposits and you give loans. But as wealthy people, affluent people increased and family offices developed, then these funds would not only be deposited with a bank, but they could be advised as to how to put their money for investment purposes.
Okay.
And over time now, family office business is almost bigger
Huge.
than
Yes. So private bank are for high net worth individuals.
correct.
Companies, entrepreneurs who sold their business and got millions, and just people earning a lot of money. So private bank is part of the bank, but it is catered towards individual families or individual rich people.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that's where you wanted to go.
That's where I wanted to go because I wanted to give them advice on how to invest. But they didn't have a spot yet. So in the meantime, they put me in the South American division of what's called syndicated loans, giving loans to government loans to industries within South America, which I knew nothing about.
And you didn't speak Spanish.
I didn't speak Spanish, but I learned berlitz. And every day I took hours of Spanish. And then they sent me. My territory in the beginning was Honduras and Ecuador. So those two countries. Eventually I got to go to Venezuela and Mexico and Brazil and Chile, etc. I knew nothing about it, but it was so much fun. So for a year and a half I did that. And I got to see South America and what a beautiful country it is. And I kept wondering why the U.S. did not have more connections, because it was right next to the United States, rich with minerals, lots of opportunities, and you needed China to do what they're doing today to recognize how valuable the connection is with South America, which is a pity, but it is what it is. But I had a lot of fun.
Yes, and you managed to learn the language to be able
managed
to
learn the
socialize.
language. I wasn't that fluent, but I understood what was going on.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So again, for those listening, learn the job. Prepare. If you're thrown into something that you're not prepared for, then you prepare yourself.
Exactly.
Right. Yes. Okay. And what happened after Citibank?
Well, I stayed there for 5 years, but after a year, they.
So you were thrown to South America, and
Right.
after 1 year and a half,
Well, I
you came
waited
back.
for the private bank to have a spot for me. And it's not that they were creating a spot, but I waited until I was constantly checking to see whether there'll be a vacancy in the Asia department. And then, sure enough, eventually they did. So I took that assignment initially as a junior analyst. And it was kind of a double dotted because on one hand, I was an analyst for the portfolio manager that invests in Asia. And then I was also a private banker. So it was both. It was private banking and also money management. And on the private banking side, they asked me to help support the lady who did Asia. But in fact, she had enough staff. So sometimes I would just be a substitute for people who got very busy. So they had the Middle Eastern group, which was very, very active then in the, because there was oil money. And I was so naive, I didn't understand, but a lot of it was really helping wealthy men support their multiple wives. And so, one door comes in, wife number one, then door number two was wife number two, and I had to keep it a secret to everybody. So I had no idea. There was so many things that I learned. Another thing that I learned was a lot of wealthy people, they sign contracts in mid-air, because in mid-air, you're not in any country, you don't pay taxes. So I was learning many, many things that really shocked me. And we had Koreans coming in with almost $1 billion worth of cash. And they will come with suitcases and just drop it. They said, I don't have time. I have to go to the airport. And we have to figure out, we only have their name, things like that. There were so many stories. So I found it fascinating. But I was coming to the realization that really I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that full time. But anyway, the other part of my job was as an analyst for a fellow named Barry Gilman. And I think it's wonderful when you join a corporation that you have a mentor. And not everybody is lucky to have a mentor. My first job at Goldman and the second job at a Citi on the South American desk, I did not have a mentor. But this job, he was patient, kind, and also showed me the way how to be an analyst, how to analyze companies and stocks. And so I was making recommendations on what he should buy as a portfolio manager, and I learned a lot.
Okay. So for those listening, very important when you are in a big corporation, find a mentor. A mentor will be the one to help you, guide you on your path, whether to learn or to go up. Yes.
Well, that's just it. I think also when you don't have a mentor, if you're in a large corporation, always look for opportunities because you could be stuck in one area and always ask to be transferred.
And then is that because you have a good relationship with your boss or with HR, human resources?
No, I never talked to human resources.
No?
Yeah, in those days, I don't think they had a very vibrant human resources at the time.
Yes.
Right.
So you just keep your eyes open,
Right.
and you
Keeping
ask
our-
questions.
Yes. I did try to reach out to other people within other divisions, so I get to learn what do the other divisions do. Because in a bank, there's so many different things happening in each department. So just keeping your eyes open, like you said, and just making friends with other people and trying to figure out what are they doing that's different. That
Yes,
is very
yes.
helpful.
Do you have any special quality that you would say to those who are listening in order to be successful in a corporate setting, aside from finding a mentor and aside from knowing where you want to go? What would you say is a good interpersonal quality?
Sure. Well, I think Asians tend to be rather reticent to begin with. So I think pushing yourself out of the box, as I said, getting to know other people in different divisions and, say that you want to just have lunch at the cafeteria together, getting to know and understand what other divisions are all about. Also, Asians are not so good at politicking. And I was never good, which is why I got out of it. But it was so important to understand politicking. I had no idea what politics is all about, even though my father was a politician. And my mother always said, stay away from politics. So I stayed away. But I was not good at it. And I realized that over time, you needed to really especially learn how to sell yourself. Not sell yourself meaning promote yourself in terms of getting promotions and making sure that you get your annual checkup, the reviews done properly, and also making sure that you're properly compensated. Also, as an Asian, if you think you're a good person or a good girl, people will recognize you. They don't recognize you. You have to really promote yourself. So
All right.
I learned that as well.
This is United States, America. So those listening, if you think you're good, you promote yourself because nobody else will.
That's unfortunately that is the
That's
case.
that's the reality.
Right. And
yes.
I wanted that vice president title very badly, and I'm thinking, why am I not getting it? Or even when I was in that South American department, I was next to get an office, but somebody else came. She was very good at promoting herself, and she got promoted. Even at Goldman Sachs, the promotion was, do you have a plastic trash can or a leather trash can? And everybody wanted that leather trash can.
That means
And I'm
you've moved up.
And I was thinking, who cares if it's plastic or leather? But that meant a lot to them. So I realized that, okay, if I really wanted to move up, I had to play that same game, which I was not good at, frankly. But
All right, but you learned along the way.
Yes.
And so what made you move towards
Okay, so then I became a co-portfolio manager with my supervisor, and we were investing in Asia. And, that was the time when Asia became very hot. Japan was very hot, and China was coming out.
Was this 1990s?
Yes, yes. So I felt that, yes, I got a job offer, which doubled, almost tripled my salary. So that was a very clear decision.
To another company.
Firm called Robert Fleming, which is part of Jardine Fleming, which is a British firm. And I was surrounded by lords, and most of the senior people
British
were British people,
lords.
British and Scottish people. And it was a huge transition, a smaller firm, because of course at the time Citi had tens of thousands of people. This firm it was a New York branch, so it was much smaller. And so eventually I ran a whole department and investing in Asia.
And your experience as being an analyst allowed you to identify good companies in Asia.
Right. Although eventually I ran, and we went from the buy. That's called the buy side when you're an analyst and portfolio manager, and the sell side is the trading floor and being a broker, et cetera. So I ran that particular division.
Both.
I wasn't on the money management side. I was on the broker and trading floor.
For your clients, for
the institutional clients.
Right. Institutional meaning the big ones,
Right,
pension
corporates.
funds,
Yes,
corporates,
exactly. Endowments.
and endowments. Right. Yeah. All right. So did you enjoy that?
I loved
running all
Yeah,
divisions.
I loved it. Of course, I was the only woman. So I guess the real issue I had was, even though I was a basketball player, because I'm pretty tall in Japan compared to my other Asian girls, but I was not naturally attracted to sports. So I did not memorize. I think it's a natural thing for most men to know all the athletes' names, the scores. I don't know if you watch sports, but it doesn't come naturally to me. But this is something that I memorized every morning with my husband. What was the score? He would give me a summary. What was the score? Who did it? So that when I go to the office, hi guys, did you watch this game? So we had some camaraderie.
Right. Great. So know who are your co-employees, and talk to them about what interests them. Yes. So you were, in that sense, you had
I tried.
Camaraderie with all of the men.
Right.
Yes, very good. And by that time, you said you were married already.
Yes, I got married while I was at Citi because I was there for 5 years.
Yes.
Right.
Can you tell the audience how you met your husband?
Sure. We were at Nomura Securities luncheon. So he
That's a Japanese
securities brokerage firm, and he was investing in Asia as well, and I was investing in Japan and Asia. So he sat next to me, and he said he was going to Japan for a business trip. Do I have any restaurant recommendations? So I said,
knowing that you had lived in Japan.
Yes. And so I gave him some name. Wasn't really interested in him, so we disappeared. He went, and 3 weeks later he came back, or 2 weeks later, but then it took him 3 weeks, and he asked me out, and I thought this was all about business, and just one thing led to the other.
Yes, meaning to say, you caught his eye.
I guess so.
And by giving him the restaurant business, that was
Yes,
like a
yes.
connection.
Yes,
Yes,
that's right.
yes. And if you don't mind, do you have children?
Yes, I have two wonderful children. One is a daughter who lives out in California. She's a documentarian, and she actually was nominated for the Oscars two years ago.
For what film?
A film called Ascension. And the funny thing is, my husband speaks Japanese, so and that's another story. But so we taught our first child, my daughter, Japanese. But
You were talking to them in Japanese as they
Yes.
were growing up.
Yes,
As he was growing
well,
up.
she was growing up, and but there are not too many Japanese nannies. So as she decided to go to kindergarten and school, nobody else spoke Japanese. So she said, "You know what? I don't want to learn it anymore, whatever." And we weren't as disciplined. When my son was born 7 years later, there were so many Chinese nannies that we had a live-in Chinese nanny who only spoke Chinese to him because they didn't speak any English.
Is that
So he's-
Mandarin?
Mandarin. So he's totally fluent in Chinese. And by then, my parents moved to the States. And my mother moved in with us after my father passed away. And she only spoke to him in Chinese. So he's totally fluent in Chinese.
How did he manage that? That he was growing up, he was speaking only Mandarin, and then was he able to connect? I mean, speak English.
Sure. So when I was growing up, we spoke Chinese at home, English at school, and TV and shopping was Japanese.
Japanese.
So, as a child, you don't even know the difference. So at home, we spoke Chinese, and in the daytime, he went to school and spoke English. So I think he's so grateful because he went on, and I never had to push him to learn Chinese. Every summer, starting in high school or middle school, he goes to China during the summer, every summer, and then studied Mandarin at different camps, language camps, and he speaks it fluently. And even to this day, he continues to want to learn. So he takes Chinese lesson twice a week still.
So he's happy that he's bilingual.
Yes, and not only that, he's now taken on investing in China. And that's his main job.
Yes. Multilingual. So for those listening, don't be scared or don't hesitate to teach your children if you're Filipino or Tagalog or whatever language,
Right.
because being bilingual,
It opens up doors.
yes,
You think differently, and you really appreciate the culture.
yes, very good. I've seen that you and your husband started your own equity or your own firm.
right.
Can you give
Sure.
how did that happen?
Well, I'll start with myself first, and then I'll talk about Mark, my husband. So I was working.
Your husband's name is Mark Kingdom.
Correct. Yes. So after I joined Robert Fleming, as I told you, they were mostly British and lords and Scottish lords, etc. They had not had precedence of having women. So even though I was the biggest revenue earner for the firm, after I had my first child, I asked them if I can work one day at home. And they said it never happened. This was pre-COVID, pre-COVID. It would never work. And so they said that I had no choice but to work full time. So I felt that I was traveling so much, almost 6 months out of the year, and working very, very long hours because it's Asia. So as soon as I come home, I'm on the phone again. So I thought that maybe I should start my own thing, and I left the firm. And so that was a great impetus for me to start my own firm. With my husband, he had worked, he went to HBS, like yourself, I believe, and started...
That's Harvard Business School.
Oh, yes. They say a lot of H and a lot of BS too. Anyway, so he worked at AT&T, and he and his other friend pride themselves for having the lowest pay in the beginning.
So were they in AT&T as
Money management.
money manager?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And eventually he decided to start his own fund.
Okay. By being in AT&T, they're managing billions, I suppose.
Yes, that was a very... he wasn't managing money right away. He was an analyst to start off with as well. But by the time I met him, he was already an analyst and has started his own fund.
Sounds fun. Okay. So for those listening, an analyst trains you to identify what businesses are good, what businesses will succeed, and what businesses will fail. Because you just study a lot, you analyze every single
Right.
businesses, and by doing that, you sort of have a feel.
Right.
Of
And then
what-
you recommend the stocks.
Yes, yes,
Right,
yes.
right.
So by the time you met, he was already in his own firm.
Yes, he just started. No, he was just starting his own firm, and my mother had just moved to the States, and she would make his lunch every day. And he thought it was a good idea too, because he didn't know where he would go, and it would save him money, and
Yes.
it gave my mother a purpose.
Yes, yes, yes. That's very Asian.
Yes,
Very
yes,
Asian. In the Philippines,
Yes.
we don't say bon appetit. We say kain na. Let's eat.
Yes,
yes.
yes, exactly.
That's the start of your husband and wife
Right.
team. So in a way, you're also a co-founder.
Well, no, we tried working together, but his way of investing and my way of investing was very different at the time, and we kept fighting. So we said, this is not good for our marriage. So he did his own thing, and I did my own thing. And what I did was what's called fund of funds, which is I invest in fund managers. And what he did was, as a portfolio manager, invest in equities. So he invested in stocks in the stock market. So a little bit different. So I would look for managers who would invest in stocks, but I created what's called fund of funds.
So your clients are the one who's giving you money.
Correct.
Okay, you are helping them, or you are deciding for them where
Right.
to put their money
Right.
that will produce the most income or the most growth.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And because my previous job was investing in Asia and helping institutional clients, I knew which other managers are in Asia. So hedge funds was a relatively new field for Asia.
Could you explain what hedge fund is?
Hedge fund is a fund that can go long, which means stock market, you buy a stock, or go short, you will sell short a company, meaning in the future you expect the stock price to go down. So a hedge fund manager can go long or short, and the idea is that you don't lose money either way, but of course you do lose money. But
If you bet wrong.
if you bet wrong, right? So that was a time when hedge funds were just growing in Asia. It was a relatively new thing. So I was blessed with that. And I made enough money just to save. And I invested in many, many hedge funds in Asia. And so that was my company.
So you invested for yourself and for your
And my
clients.
yes. And so I was building the clients because it was a relatively new business. But being at the right time, at the right place is also, very fortunate.
And also knowing what to do,
Knowing what to
identifying. So your background will help you move to other companies or to
Yes.
other kinds of business.
Yes.
Because the background you had
Right.
enabled you to make decisions on what companies to invest in
Exactly.
or what funds,
Yes.
since you have met many of them.
Right. And, I even went as far as Australia, where they only had about maybe 15 hedge funds or so. So I would meet every one of them. Same thing in Indonesia and Thailand, et cetera.
Yeah. For many working women with children growing up, how do you balance it? How did you balance it? You're flying over to,
Right.
here and there.
So
Yeah.
before my mother moved in, it was very difficult. As I said, I was working 6 months out of the year overseas, and I never saw my daughter, and it was very hard for me and for my daughter, of course. So that's when I decided that, and they wouldn't let me work at home on Fridays. So I said, okay, forget it. So I decided to start my own.
Their loss, your gain.
Yes, that's how I see it as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And what happened now to as they were growing up? How did you? With your mother was with you, so that's
Yes, that made
surrogate
a huge
mother.
difference. Yes,
Yes.
And so that's one of the things that Sheila said to me as well, that really we can solve this whole women issue that they have to straddle work and home if we had a better childcare system.
Yes. Sheila Marcelo is a Filipina American that started care.com around 20 years ago because she herself had problem with her son.
Yes.
And now, after 15 years of working on it, she sold it for $500 million. And now she's into another. She's one of those honored. Thank you for honoring her too.
No, it was wonderful.
In the
to be able
Serica
to-
Initiative.
Yes.
Yes.
It was great fun to have you both.
Yes. So your children were growing up.
Yes.
And am I correct that you balanced work and raising a kid and being a good wife all together?
It was not
Because-
easy, yes. Never easy, but at the same time, I think having had my mother and the Chinese nannies really helped.
Okay, surrogate. You have to earn enough. So you have surrogate
It's true.
parents if you want the kind of
Sure.
work that you're doing
Right,
that
right.
requires travel, long hours, etc.
Right.
Yes,
No, I
yes.
remember there were days when I was so tired, my eyes were like that, very hazy. I would just come home and hit the bed.
Yes,
They were very trying years.
Yes, yes.
But also, I have a very supportive husband, and that also, and not demanding at all, and that's very, very helpful.
Okay. All right. You got that, girls, women. You must find the man that will support your ambition.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and will not be feel threatened,
Neither threatened nor feel abandoned.
abandoned. Yes, yes. And because he himself is successful.
Yes.
It's not
yes.
like you're successful and he's not, because
Right.
that will cause problems.
Yes, for some. I mean, now in this day today, I know quite a few women whose husbands are house husbands.
House husbands, yes.
And they seem to have very successful relationships, and
Yes.
it's more socially acceptable.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Okay, so depends on your own personality, women. All right, if you are the go getter,
Right.
if you are the rocket ship, then you need a man who will support your ambition.
Right, exactly.
Yes, and will be happy doing what women used to do, which is take care of home, take care for the children.
Right, exactly.
Do housework.
Exactly.
Yes, but earn enough money.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
So, what else is in the future for you? Meaning to say, you're doing this now, but how do you see yourself in the next 10 years?
I know. I find that after I went to MBA, my sister said that I've become a robot because everything was planning. So I had a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 25-year. None of it came true. And I've learned my lesson that you have to be prepared so that when the opportunity arises, then you can seize the opportunity. For instance, this opportunity arose to have a podcast with you. I would have never planned for it, and I seized the moment. So right now, I do not have a plan 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but I'm open to adventure.
Okay. All right. Another lesson for you women and also the men. When an opportunity comes, seize it. Don't say, I'm not ready.
Right.
Or don't say, I can't do it. When it comes, just take it.
Well, you'll know that it's something that interests you.
Of course, it must be interest you. Don't take it on if it doesn't interest you.
Right, exactly.
Because then you'll consider it drudgery.
Right, exactly.
Yes. And for your 2 children, how do you feel about what they are doing now?
Well, my son went on to study business. At first, we weren't sure what he would pursue because we don't impose. I'm not your typical tiger mom. But he had his own couple of startups. The first one was helping young people avoid or recover from over social media. And he was doing pretty well until I think Facebook and all the other social media decided to band together and put the other small businesses out of business.
So he has also he went into the internet, software.
Software, and it was called Boldfish, and it was really trying to help young people overcome from social media overdose. Yeah, so it was a very good sort of impact investing effort. But again, as I mentioned, many of the big media put the small people out of business. So he was one of the victims, so to speak. So then he went on to start a next one with NFT and crypto, etc. And then I have to thank Samuel Bankman-Friedman because when FTX fell apart,
Yes.
His 15 investors decided to put everything on hold. And so he asked my husband, can I park myself at your firm for 3 months? And then once we get back on our feet, we will continue doing what he was doing, the crypto and NFT. And I was never sure because it's so up and down. And then he loved what he was doing as an analyst at my husband's firm. So now he works with him full time. So my husband is just ecstatic.
Yes.
And my son is happy, and I'm happy that they're both happy.
Yes, very good. That's a good happy ending.
Yes. Or
Yes.
beginning.
Or the beginning.
Yes.
Yes. So for lessons, you will experience failure. You will experience disappointment, frustration. But, the sun comes up tomorrow.
Right, exactly.
So he reinvented himself.
Yes.
Yeah.
New doors open.
New doors open. All right. For those of you who have some questions for Miss Anla Cheng, please send it to askloidalewis@gmail.com. askloidalewis@gmail.com. What are some of Serica Initiative's program that help battle Asian hate?
We are very fortunate to be able to partner with PBS and WNET, and we are part of two of their many series. One is called Exploring Hate. It originally started by featuring individuals to talk about anti-Semitism, but then they went on to talk about many types of anti-hate, including Blacks and Asians. And now, as AAPI issues have risen over the last 5 years, we've done already 3 years of filming on Asians. What we want to do is not so much point out the Asian hate, which many other grassroots organizations have been very successful at doing this. We want to really lift up our community by featuring Asians whom most of us have never heard of. Communities such as Chinese Cubans, the Hmong Vietnamese in the Midwest. Many of those are Jewish Asians. There's a whole community about Asians who have married Jewish people, including myself. And there's a whole community in the Midwest. So we have this Filipino lady who started reggae. Do you know this lady, Patty Cheng? She's in the Caribbean. She made reggae music popular. And we just honored her last year. So we try to uplift our community by showing that Asian Americans have contributed to the fabric of American life. So we interview a lot of these people. And by doing that, we want to demonstrate that we have made a difference. And the best part of it is that this film gets translated and converted into educational material that get taught to millions of children in the United States in the classroom. And as we all know, the average American, not Asian Americans, but Americans, are taught Asian history maybe 3 months or 6 months out of their entire 12 school years. So what we want to do is to create more content that end up becoming history books and literature books that get taught to Americans in their classrooms. Also, we're partnered with Columbia University. They're starting what's called the Asian American Initiative. I think we introduced it at our gala. And that's creating also content to have a major in Asian American major and minor. So by creating more educational content, we hope to educate the generation so that by the time the next generation, the following generations have a lot of understanding about Asian Americans and how we are part of American life.
That's excellent. Yes, in fact, from Census 2010 to 2020, it seems that the Asian Americans have grown 36%.
Yes.
The growth is remarkable compared to all the other ethnic minorities. Yes.
And also contributing from a GDP per capita standpoint to the economy here.
Yes, yes. The Asian Americans, especially, Asian Americans as a whole, has a greater income than other ethnic minorities. Yes. Yes, so
maybe
they should.
Even against white and Caucasians as well, actually.
To some, yes, that's right. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Can you tell us a little about the podcast you once had? Is that called Serica?
Yes.
Yes, and what happened? What was it? How big was it? And then it's no longer there.
So Serica podcast still exists today, but not under our umbrella. So the China Project in our media portal had a newsletter. Actually, at one point, we had 7 newsletters and 7 podcasts. But the main podcast was Serica Podcast, hosted by Kaiser Kuo. Kaiser Kuo's parents are from Taiwan, but now lives in the United States, lives in North Carolina, lived in China for 25 years. And he had been doing this podcast for 5 years before he joined us. And we celebrated his 500th podcast when he was with us, but we did it for 8 years together. And every week he would interview a specialist on China, whether it's a think tank specialist, whether he's a politician or a professor, a journalist, but usually someone who's a commentator or an expert on China or U.S.-China relations. It was really the go-to place if you wanted to understand what's going on in China. And
is it still?
He has it under his own. He kept his own trademark, Serica Podcast. He used to work at Baidu, which is like the Google of China, and he used to be their PR man. and the international communications expert. That was his job. And he used to be in China, the first major rock band in China. So he has long hair, still maintained that rock band sort of insignia, image. Yeah. And he's still that. His son also has long hair, but he's carried on his Serica podcast under the umbrella of Wisconsin University. But it's changed a little bit. When he did it with us, he really did much more high-profile interviews. It was great. It was really the go-to place. So I'm very, very sad that we're not working with him now.
You mean to say you were working with him and then you decided you will not continue?
Right. So at the time, with all this U.S.-China tension, unfortunately, we were cited as potentially a target by the U.S. government. And so I decided that rather than pursue something that I wasn't really fully appreciated by the U.S. government, and earlier on, going back 6 or 7 years ago, the Chinese government wasn't very happy with us because they thought we were bashing China, which we really weren't, but there was a little misunderstanding. So I just thought, well, with all these legal fees, it just didn't make sense. And we had a growing need for Serica. And even though the Serica podcast had 500,000 viewers and growing,
500,000, that's a lot.
It was a lot. It was very, very successful. And really every ambassador, every think tank group, every major corporation listened to us. So we had a huge following. And we had a total of 2 million unique users. So it was a very successful enterprise. But the tension became really unbearable. So we decided to just shut it down.
Yes. And what does Serica Initiative?
Serica is a Latin and Greek word called silk, for silk root.
Oh, the silk root, yes. In history books, for those of you who are studying Oriental history, okay, the silk route was during the time of the Middle Ages, where Marco Polo visited China. Is that the time that the Silk Route?
The Silk Road probably started a little earlier.
But even earlier than that.
Connected the Middle East to China.
To China, yes. Okay, so Serica is Latin.
Yes, Latin
and Greek. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Now, my last question, as a woman and an AAPI immigrant who has achieved so much in your life, what will you say you are most proud of? And that's from Tim E.
I think I'm very proud of the fact that I created a community, because at the end of the day, if I don't serve a purpose, if I'm just doing it for me, I would probably write a book. But I feel that once I develop a community and the people give me feedback, that it really gives them strength, really gives them hope, aspiration, influence, being a role model. And I'm sure you feel the same way, that you feel that your purpose is well achieved. So that makes me very proud that I'm able to make a difference to these people.
So in the end, those of you who have been listening, in the end, it's how you serve, how you give, that gives you value or a purpose.
Right.
Very good. That you are proud of.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what I'm most proud of.
Thank you, Anla. All right. That concludes our podcast, the Loida Lewis podcast. Live, love, laugh, and learn together. Thank you. And thank you, Anla.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Enjoyed it.
Very good.
The Loida Lewis podcast, hosted by Loida Lewis, is produced by the creators of Over a Glass or Two, Jesse and JV, executive produced by Loida Nicolas Lewis. Rate and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for a chance to be featured on a future episode. Have a question for Miss Loida? Just email us on askloidalewis@gmail.com. Your question might make its way to a future episode. Subscribe on all major platforms to never miss a beat. Thank you for listening to the Loida Lewis podcast. Let's live, love, laugh, and learn together